Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and this is going to be a video discussion on Psycho-Pass, episodes 21 and 22 respectively, the series finale of Psycho-Pass, as it were. To begin with, you could say it all ends here, and whether you've had ideas as to how that would play out or not, I'd be surprised if while watching this anyone said they hadn't felt at some point either saddened, stunned, shocked, surprised, or perhaps a mixture of all those things, maybe even a little frustration as well, just for good measure. Fast on the coattails of Kagami as episode 21 opens, the MWPSB, led for all intents and purposes by Akane, is making their way toward the factory Makishima has set its sights on with the intent of crashing the production of the supergrain Hyper Oats, and thus leveling this not-too-distant future Japanese society. It's Kane's hope, even as they race there, that they can arrive before Kagami has a chance of taking Makishima's life, the only recourse he feels that is left to them. And it is somewhat surprising, I have to admit, to see Akane and crew effectively beat Kagami there, in a sense, as he can't maneuver around the tight security on the outer walls of the factory. Akane has effectively taken command of the unit, as she's driven, unbeknownst to everyone else, by deals she's made with the Sybil system, mainly that she's agreed to bring in Makishima alive, and as a recompense, Sybil would allow for Kagami too to be brought in, rather than killed straight away. But the first hitch in the plan comes with how they need to shut down the factory's power, thus disabling whatever plans Makishima has set in motion, but also making it possible for Kagami to enter the fray. Without any other choice, Akane does so, and quickly orders that the group separate and take different avenues to track down Makishima before Kagami can hopefully get to him. There are some great character moments all throughout this two-part finale as I see it, from Akane herself now having to come into her own, and even going so far as to stand face-to-face with Sybil, never faltering under the weight of realization of what Sybil really is. But I also loved the confidence displayed in Yayoi, who also tells Akane that she's pretty much proud to be following her, that she and everyone else can see somehow she's different, has more conviction, and is actually capable of bringing more to the table of this investigation. It's a great moment of camaraderie that hints at whatever potential future these characters have, it's going to be one where they continue to work together, that they'll be a solid unit, unafraid to trust each other, which I absolutely love. But when Akane and Yayoi get to where they assume Makishima will be, she realizes she's made a potentially fatal error and quickly leaves Yayoi behind, trying to reach Tomome and Ginoza, who've gone in the other direction per her earlier orders, and directly on the path to the proverbial lion's den. The scene was adequately set, as Gino and his father entered the fray to reveal horrors and great sadness. Tomome, being the ever-old dog Gumshoe, realized soon the danger they were in spite of Akane's lack of being able to get through to them, as Makishima soon revealed himself. Tomome and Gino both put up a valiant effort in facing and trying to fight off Makishima, but Gino had succumbed to a trap and found himself caught under the weight of some huge pieces of collapsed machinery. And this is where the truth of the tumultuous and sometimes misunderstood relationships between these two proud men came to its ultimate fruition. Tomome had Makishima in what amounted to a wrestling hold on the floor, as Gino could only watch in frustration. Even when Makishima pulled out a stick of dynamite and lit it, Gino pressed his father not to let go of their quarry, choosing justice over his own life. Whether Gino could really comprehend what his father did in those ensuing moments is unclear, as both men, though family, really had their own distinctive worldviews. But it was apparent to Tomome what Makishima had divined to do: throw the dynamite at Gino so Tomome would give him up, and that's exactly what Tomome did. For a parent's love for his child took precedence over laws and justice, seeking to fulfill obligations and orders. Tomome only saw that his son, whom he loved dearly, in spite of their being incapable of ever seeing eye to eye really, even understanding each other, was about to die. And so he let the bad man go and paid the ultimate sacrifice so that Gino would live on. It was quite the heart-wrenching scene, I have to say, probably adding to it my own familial losses suffered in life. And it's not without some sense of irony, I thought, as well, because much as his father worked with a cybernetic arm, we see Gino loses one of his as he brings himself to his dying father's side. It's at this point that Kagami has caught up to them, as yet retaining his revolver instead of a Dominator, and you can see the brief indecision he feels when he sees Gino hovering over Tomome's body. He wants to stay, to help them, but he can't. And so again, he pursues Makishima. This effectively brings us to the final episode, episode 22, which opens up with Makishima and Kagami throwing down in a knife fight. The action was thoroughly intense, and proved to some degree that Kagami was the better fighter of the two, as he manages to cut Makishima pretty near to his heart. But it also made me wonder whether Makishima's real intent at this point in the game was the follow-through of his earlier plan of spiking the Hyper Road production and ultimately shutting it down. I say this because at this point, Makishima has taken to quoting scripture, and there's an overall air that he's seemingly being resigned to the fact that he isn't coming out of this one alive. But there's also a hint of satisfaction as he realizes everything he's done to this point has been received and understood by Kagami. That in effect, all is not lost if someone bears the knowledge of what SXeblues is, what it's capable of, and what it ultimately means for their society. Akane shares in this realization too, I think, being indicated by her perseverance in seeing the letter of the law play out as she'd prefer it to, giving chase after Makishima even after he's made off with a truck, and she's tried once again to make Kagami promise to remain an enforcer and not become a killer soon after she'd arrived on the scene. Talk about Akane being an action hero of sorts, as she held onto the rear of the speeding truck, angling to shoot out the tires and ultimately crashing it. I was just in awe of her in those moments, but I was also terrified for her soon thereafter when Makishima came out of the truck, still bleeding though he was, picked up the displaced revolver and pointed it at her head. He pulled the trigger too, and were it not for the gun being empty, Akane would have been gone, just as Tomomi was. And so, the final showdown between Kagami and Makishima soon followed. Nothing Akane could do in those moments would change what unfolded, as she herself pretty much summarized. We hear her words, which go all the way back to that flash forward in episode 1 that started this whole ball of wax rolling. For whatever reason, she says, even before they knew each other, this was to be their fate. And so it was that Makishima died at Kagami's hand. I almost had to wonder, sensing this was to be how their ultimate story played out, just what could possibly be next. How they could wrap up this series, close off all ties as it were, and leave it as satisfying an experience as when it all began. And what was given to us was, in my estimation, just a brilliant soliloquy that brought us nearly full circle. Skipping ahead 2 months, we see that Gino is visiting his father's grave, confiding in him as much as to himself that he's resolved to continue pursuing the fulfillment of justice as best he can. Given that his criminal coefficient has been raised irreparably in the wake of losing his father and such, it's almost fitting that he'll be taking his father's place, so to speak, as the old dog in the unit. Which leaves Akane ultimately in command of it, but not before another confrontation with the largely unaffected and passive SXeblues system, which outlines that it feels working with her will bring about their ultimate vision of a society that coexists with it, knowing full well what the system is. Akane's reaction to this is one that wasn't so much surprising as rejuvenating. She tells SXeblues in effect, maybe not today and maybe not tomorrow, but someday they will be stopped, shut down by the very hands they seek to control at a societal level, and it is no less than inspiring to me to hear the conviction in Akane's words. It was also interesting to see that she and Gino were ruminating over everything that unfolded. He's still asking the question of whether Kagari is alive or not, as I myself have to wonder as we haven't seen his corpse, nor do we know whatever happened to that missing enforcer from the alternate unit. I can't help but wonder if these are avenues left open for an eventual sequel story set within this universe. I thought it was equally surprising to see Yayoi and Shinon having been in bed together. That is to say, without there having been any real hint of such a relationship in the series up to this point. But being that I heard that this was represented in the manga, it wasn't as shocking to me as I would guess it would be to those unfamiliar with that aspect of it. Still, they're speaking of Kagami and the others who were lost as being romantics, especially given their current environs when they're discussing it, almost seems to be an ironic realization, for lack of another way of putting it. And in the end, we see Akane much in the position Ginoza was at the open of the series, commanding the MWPSB during an unfolding investigation, and welcoming to the unit a new secondary investigator. I'd be lying if I said seeing just who it was wasn't entirely surprising and immediately inducing of a smile on my face. Mika Shimazuki, the girl whose friend and classmate was murdered by Rokako Oryo at Oso Academy way back when. The same girl comforted by Yayoi in that episode, which was the first real standout moment I felt of Yayoi in the series, set as a prelude to her own flashback episode. Again, these realizations just solidifying for me that this series has effectively gone full circle, but not necessarily in a way that will leave it repeating itself, just one that promises that this world, though we leave it here and now, will continue on, going boldly into whatever future sees fit to play out within its confines. What better way to hint at that at seeing the one final shot of who we can only assume to be Kagami reading Swan's way, as if to suggest that in some way he may attempt to fulfill Makishima's desired takedown of Sybil, but as to that, it's really anybody's guess. In the aftermath of such a finale, I will say I wouldn't be at all surprised if there were fans of the series who may have felt let down by it in a way. And I'd quickly pick up with that suggestion with a question. How else could it have gone? From the get-go, we're told that this is always meant to be the way of it. We're even reminded of that fact a little more than halfway through the series, when finally that flash forward that set things rolling became the present. Was the systematic shutdown of Sybil, the psychotic, murderous, arguable anti-hero's chosen destiny, ever really the realistic one? I don't think so. What's more, in spite of the potential aforementioned avenues that could be taken up for a sequel series, the closure at the end felt to me to be a natural one, because that's exactly what life is, closure being much more a state of mind than anything tangible. To me, it works as it is, as it was laid bare in the end. What it equates to for me is not so much aspirations unfulfilled, but the hope that makes us move ever forward. And every episode in this series was vigorously moving forward every step of the way. As a final thought, I'll dare to compare the series overall with Shakespeare's Sonnet 64, which reads, "When I have seen by time's fell hand defaced the rich proud cost of outworn buried age, when sometime lofty towers I see down raised, and brass eternal slave to mortal rage, when I have seen the hungry ocean gain advantage on the kingdom of the shore, and the firm soil win of the watery main, increasing store with loss and loss with store, when I have seen such interchange of state, or state itself confounded to decay, ruin hath taught me thus to ruminate, that time will come and take my love away. This thought is as a death which cannot choose, but weep to have that which it fears to lose." And so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this series finale of Psycho Pass, if you've seen it, whether you were left ultimately pleased with or unfulfilled by it, what you think of the series overall now that it's done. Does it still hold in your estimation the position of best series for 2012, as I've heard some people claim? It definitely is for me. And otherwise, that'll be it for me on this one. I can't wait to one day own this series on DVD and watch and experience it all over again from the start. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you later. Peace.